Welcome to The Train Station, our brand new podcast for anybody that loves trains, anything about trains. We are your hosts this morning. My name is Bill Waldrop. I am in Houston, Texas, along with my co-host, Mr. Jim Lueders, also in Houston, Texas. That's where we're based out of. And we have known each other, what, Jim? Gosh, 30...
Yeah, a long time.
I think 30-something years. We've done a lot of traveling together. We'll get into all that for this. But this podcast is brand new, and we appreciate you tuning in. First, we want to start out here with kind of introducing ourselves. Again, my name is Bill Waldrop, born and raised in Houston, and still live here now. Had a lifelong love of trains. I remember being very young, traveling, with my family in the car across country, and I always told Dad to drive along the railroad tracks so I could see, any trains that may be coming or going, something like that in the early days, and a lot of great memories there. I never actually worked for the railroad. I thought about it, but I was always told by people that work for the railroad, don't go to work for the railroad, because it's kind of it could be, it's a rough way of life. Those guys are kind of tough, and they can move you around at will and stuff like that. So I never actually worked for it. The closest I got to working for the railroad was as a contract labor employee with Union Pacific when Steve Lee asked me to help him out on the UP steam crew and trips across the country. And I did that for about 23 years, traveling behind the 844, the 3985, the Centennial, the E9 diesels, all that stuff. It was a big, proud moment in my life to be associated with those fine people that ran it, and Steve, and had a great time and a lot of great stories about that. Jim, tell us where, I know all about you, but tell our listeners, where are you from? Did you ever work for the railroad, and how did this all start for you?
Well, Bill, that's interesting because I grew up in Granite City, Illinois, and then Edwardsville, Illinois, very close to St. Louis, one of the major rail terminals of America, and was lucky enough in my youth to get to travel on trains with my parents to various places in the winter and the summer. And of course, it all started with a Lionel train under the Christmas tree.
Of course.
Back in the 1950s, when Lionel was really in its prime. And then our layout got a little bigger and grew into the basement, and had a huge layout, and had collected a lot of Lionel over the years, and had a
Don't you wish you had those today?
Yeah, I only have my Santa Fe F units left. The rest of it was given away or sold.
Oh, my goodness.
But anyway, had a great youth in the 1950s with real trains way before Amtrak was even conceived. Right. Got to ride on some very classy trains in Pullman cars and eating in the diner and the whole 9 yards. So it was great. I did work for the Wabash Railroad for just a few months in 1964.
What did you do for them?
I was a yard clerk in the freight yards at various places near Decatur, Illinois. And then I got a really good job in St. Louis at the Wabash Delmar station, selling tickets as a ticket clerk for the suburban station in St. Louis. And so it was like getting paid to watch passenger trains for 8 hours. Wow. And that was a fun job and then I decided finally, I've had enough of this, and decided to go back to college and move to Tyler, Texas.
Texas. Heck yeah.
And that was about January of 1965. And went through there and got drafted in the mid-60s, and then came back and went to college in East Texas State, another cotton belt town, and didn't do too much rail fanning in those days, but I would get involved every once in a while with the trains, but kind of took a holiday there, and then moved to Colorado in the 70s, and then came back to Houston in the 1980s, and finally got a great job. And I've lived here since about 84. And
now, you were in Colorado, weren't you near the Moffett Tunnel?
Yes, I lived in Boulder and in Rollinsville, Colorado, which is very close, and became a big Rio Grande fan. We got really back into the trains in the 1970s when the Zephyr, the real Zephyr, was still running with the Denver and Rio Grande.
Yeah.
And had a lot of fun times out with friends on afternoons and evenings watching these trains up and down the Moffat. And I lived about, I'd say, 10, 15 miles from the actual east portal of the tunnel. Right. So in the wintertime, it was definitely cold and snowy and very windy up there, but it was really a nice area of America to view trains.
Right, right.
So anyway, back here in Houston, and I think Bill and I met in the mid-'80s with our railroad club here, the Gulf Coast chapter of the National Railway Historical Society.
We knew each other. Yeah, we knew each other through the chapter, but weren't really like close friends yet. We knew who each other were.
Right, right.
And I've been a member of the chapter 49 years. Be 50 years next year. So that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
But where we really got to know each other well was when we started running our first Union Pacific steam trips in 1992.
Right.
I believe it was 91, about a year ahead of time, that we started getting it all together. And I mean, we did all the organizations. We sold the tickets, mailed the tickets, handled the money. Luckily, you're very good with money, did all the accounting, and it was quite a job. But and we did that for a bunch of trips.
At least 4 or 5 years of trips. But that's when the UP was very friendly, and Steve Lee just helped out all the NRH chapters around America, from Kansas City all the way south here to Houston, and just did some unbelievable trips with the 844 and the 3985 and the diesels, the E9s.
Oh yeah.
So we did a lot. We had, I think, around 600 people.
I was going to say, yes, I was going to say 700, but yeah, 600 to 700 people usually, depending on how many cars Union Pacific would provide us.
Right. And that was per day. And sometimes we got to do it on Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
But boy, we had some great trips, and the donations to the chapter were quite substantial in those days. We definitely made a profit.
Oh, yes, we did. Yeah. And kept the ticket prices reasonable.
Oh, yeah.
For everybody, because I know they've gone up lately on any trips go these days lately, because they're very rare. But yeah, I mean, our policy on that was, we never went over $99 for a coach seat. We kept it under $100.
Right.
And we knew the domes would sell out, so we always sold them for a little bit higher. Right. And they actually sold out before the coaches.
Oh, yeah. Everybody wanted a dome seat.
Oh, sure.
And I think we had about at least 5 domes on that train. Those were about 16 car consist.
Yeah. And boy, we did a lot of walking through those trains. Each of those trips.
And our chapter provided all the car hosts, and we had boxed lunches, and it was a very big deal.
And we had a good crew. We trained them very well on, how to work the vestibule, what to say, and watch for safety, tell kids not to run in the train, handing out lunches, cleaning the bathrooms, all those things we had to do. I think we had probably the best crew in the country. And I think Steve Lee agreed, because he asked us to, work on some of the corporate trains that they had for Union Pacific that were not necessarily public excursions per se that we could sell tickets on. So I think we set a good example there. We did a lot of things different than other groups. Like I brought in police officers to be on the train, uniformed officers, and also paramedics in case anybody got hurt, and we needed them on a couple of occasions.
Right.
Something like that. Hey, we're going to take a break here real quick. But first, I want to let everybody know we'd love to hear from you, our listeners, on our new podcast here called The Train Station. And jot down this email address, and please give us an email. Let us know that you're listening, where you are, and what your interest in railroading is. If you have any questions about us, for us, or some interesting topics, we'd love to hear from you. Our email address is Houston Railfans, plural, HoustonRailfans@gmail.com. HoustonRailfans@gmail.com. So drop us a line. Let us know you're listening. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know, who's out there paying attention, and give us some topics. And even if you've got an interesting story yourself of your childhood travels by train, or interesting travels anywhere, photography, model railroading, UP steam trips, any steam trips, things like that. If you've got an interesting topic and you got an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. HoustonRailFans@gmail.com. We got a lot more to talk about. We're going to take a quick break right here. We'll be right back. He is Jim Lueders. I am Bill Waldrop, and you're tuned to The Train Station.
Hello, everybody. This is Todd Dewey from the hit show Ice Road Truckers on the History Channel. And my source of radio and all truckers news, I go to tncradio.live.
This infoblog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 6 things to consider before starting your career in trucking. Truck drivers are often referred to as the backbone of America. They haul roughly 70% of America's freight. Nearly every good consumed in the United States has been shipped by a truck. Right now, the demand for truck drivers is higher than ever. The growing truck driver shortage in America is a topic of concern and has been for the past 4 years. The United States is in dire need of people to start driving trucks. Are you considering becoming a truck driver, but not quite sure if it's the career path for you? Here are 6 things potential truck drivers need to know before starting their career in the trucking industry. Know your why. Why do I want to become a truck driver? Is one of the first questions you should ask yourself before starting your career in trucking. Knowing and understanding your why is important so that you make sure that trucking is something you'll enjoy. Nothing is more draining than working in a career field that you're not passionate about and excited about. Truck drivers are already more likely to struggle with mental health problems because of the trucking lifestyle. So to avoid dreading your trucking career, ask yourself, why do I want to be a truck driver? Long work hours. It's obvious that truck drivers spend a majority of their workday in the driver's seat, but many new drivers don't realize how hard it can be sitting for long periods. Drivers spend hours upon hours sitting down. This can result in leg, back, and neck pain. If you're the type of person who cannot handle sitting down for several hours at a time, then truck driving is not for you. Another thing to consider is how long a typical workday is for a truck driver. Drivers are legally allowed to work 14 hours a day, but are limited to 11 hours of driving time. They must take a mandatory 30-minute break by the 8th hour of duty. Following the long workday, drivers must have 10 hours of off-duty time. In a work week, drivers cannot exceed more than 60 hours of work or 70 hours over 8 days. Failure to follow these HOS rules can result in being shut down, fines, and lower carrier safety ratings. A new lifestyle. There's not a career quite like trucking. It's nothing like your typical 9-to-5 Monday through Friday job. It's long hours, days, and most times weeks away from home. Truck drivers often experience loneliness, depression, and anxiety. If you're someone who's used to working with many people, then truck driving will be a shock. Drivers will go days or weeks without seeing their loved ones, and it can really take a toll on truckers, especially those who are new. Adjusting to this lifestyle can be challenging at first, but once you do, you can live a rewarding life as a truck driver. Getting seat time. The more experience you have as a truck driver, the better. With more experience, you'll land better truck driving jobs and better pay. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, truck drivers earn an average of over $40,000 a year. Yet, many trucking companies advertise higher rates of pay for experienced drivers. Over time, you can negotiate a higher rate per mile. Your relationships will suffer. It doesn't matter if you're on the road or at home. Make time for family. Make it a priority to talk to someone in your family once a day. It can be tough for truckers, especially long-haul truck drivers, to maintain relationships with their families due to the trucking lifestyle. Keeping in contact with your loved ones will help life on the road be less lonely. Lack of sleep. Getting the recommended amount of sleep each night is a rare thing for truckers. Although sleep may be difficult for truckers because of the uncomfortable way of living, it's essential to their well-being and safety. Make it a priority to get good sleep and make a sleep schedule. Set an alarm for a certain time and turn off all electronics and get your much-needed sleep. Not getting enough sleep makes life on the road miserable. Although there may seem like many downsides, truck driving can be a very rewarding and exciting career. As a truck driver, you have freedom on the open road and a chance to see America's most beautiful places. For information on trucking, be sure to check out the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Welcome back to The Train Station. I'm Bill Waldrop, and that is Jim Lueders. We are your co-host for this new podcast across the U.S. and Canada. We appreciate you letting us know if you're listening and if you how you like the show. We can be reached for questions and comments and topics at Houston Railfans, that's plural, Houston Railfans @gmail.com. We appreciate you listening. Hope you're enjoying the show as we kind of get into this for the first time and get smoothed out a little bit. We were talking earlier about our earlier childhoods and how much we love trains and how we got involved in them. Now, Jim, you are still kind of involved in the train world in some way with what you're doing now. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to bring that up later on?
Yeah, let's bring up my fantastic railroad contract job that I have.
Right.
And I move high, wide load cargoes around on freight trains. And we'll
kind of explain that what exactly a high, wide load is for people that may not be familiar.
Well, a high, wide load is what they also call a dimensional load. And mainly they're on flat cars. They're very heavy and high and wide, depending on the commodity that we're hauling. I normally haul transformers, power transformers, wind farms. But it can be anything from pressure vessels to large pipe to wind turbines, all kinds of odd commodities.
That you wouldn't normally see on a regular freight train.
Right. Or you can't put them in a boxcar. You got to put them in a flat car. You got to put them on a flat car.
Right. Now, in most cases, these are pulled in the consist of a regular freight train, or are they special moves, or does it kind of depend on the load where it's just that's the only thing that's on the train is like an engine and a buffer car and your car?
Yeah, it just depends on the shipper's request. They do special trains if it's really a big dimensional problem on weight or height and the clearances, depending on what part of the country it's going on. Right. The railroad decides how they're going to do it, whether it's a regular train or a special train. Right. But it can run in a normal manifest for freight train, these high, wide loads.
But the railroad has to make sure, but the railroad has to make sure that because of the weight and stuff, their bridges and things like that are wide enough or can handle the heavy weight, things like that. So that's why sometimes you get into some weird routing. It may not be the most direct route. I've seen, you've told me some of your routings. It's like, why are they going that way? Well, it may be because of weight and width clearances and things like that.
The clearance is the most important thing, because you do not want to go over a bridge and not get through the other part of that bridge with a high, wide load.
Yeah, that could be a problem. Yeah. You don't want to jam up the main line of the railroad.
All right, well, we'll sure talk about that at another time, Bill. Let's talk about some of our fantastic rail trips that we've been on in the last 10, 15 years. Yeah. And that doesn't count the Union Pacific trips. These are our own trips that we do our own itineraries on. Right. And let's talk a little about that.
All right. You want to start with the latest one, or you want to go back a little bit further back?
I think we ought to go back further back and tell everybody.
How and why we did it. Well,
we did it because this was in the 1990s and early 2000s. Continental Airlines was our savior because they developed a weekend fare called the Cool Fare, and you could buy these tickets whether you're going to California or to the East Coast for like $99 one way and $99 back as long as you went on a Saturday morning and were back by Tuesday.
Right.
And so we took some fantastic trips to the East and West Coast for a very inexpensive airline ticket, and then got on Amtrak or depending on what we were riding at the time.
Right. And one of the first ones we did, we went to the Northeast, and I think we went to, I guess it was New York City.
Right. We flew to Newark and then took the train into the city.
Of course. And then we rode what?
The famous Acela. The new fast train that Amtrak has developed, and everybody probably knows about it. It's the only piece of real estate that Amtrak actually owns from Washington, New York to Boston. Yeah. All the other Amtrak trains travel on freight railroads. They don't own that right away, but the Acela route and what they call the Northeast Corridor is all owned and operated by Amtrak.
And it's been there a long time. That's been a busy corridor. Since early 1900s, I guess.
Oh yeah, from the New Haven Railroad and the Pennsylvania Railroad.
Right.
But
and some beautiful stations and infrastructure along the way that we saw.
Oh yeah, but so we got on the Acela and we bought first class tickets, of course, and had a great time. Very comfortable, constant service by the attendants. Great lunch and constant beverage service. So it was a great ride. So we rode up to Boston that day. And I think we turned right around and came back that afternoon.
Yeah, it was. I remember it was a Sunday and we got up there and nothing was open. We just kind of walked around. It's like, well, it's a nice town. We didn't, and this is back before Uber and things like that. So we couldn't really go anywhere. But nothing was moving. It was really, really quiet. So we were there. I don't know what,
a couple
hours, something like that. And then
downtown Boston is where we were. And so we just went back to the station and caught the next train back. I think we took a Northeast Regional back. I don't think we bought a Acela ticket. They are quite expensive because obviously they compete with the shuttle service between New York and Boston and New York and Washington. Right. So Amtrak has definitely has revenue management going on with these Acela tickets. And today, I'm sure, I haven't priced a ticket in 10 years. I'm sure it's very expensive in the first class. They only have two classes, first and business class.
Right.
And they have a quiet car, no phones, no kids. And a couple of first class cars and then the rest the business class. And they have a bistro. So they do have good food and beverage service. But in the first class, it's definitely first class and very well. The food is good, and
I know they sell out a lot because I was up. I went up to Washington D.C. when I was with the police department. Went up there for a trip to Washington D.C. and we traveled to Philadelphia and back. And I tried to get us on an Acela. They were sold out. Unless you reserve way ahead of time, you're not just going to walk up and get a ticket on that thing. It's very popular. Yeah, it's more expensive, but a lot of business people use it. They can afford it, and they have probably standing reservations on those trains because they run on a very tight schedule up there. So we went on the regular, Northeast Corridor train, and it was fine.
It was a Sunday, so the businessmen weren't out there.
Right. Well, we were going during the week on this trip 2 years ago. And so it was sold out. But I mean, I saw a couple of them pass. They're beautiful. And we got just about 3.5 minutes here. So we did that on the Acelas. But now, last I heard, they were working on putting in new train sets for the Acelas. But I think there's been a snag in that. Is that correct?
Well, no, that's a different train set, a Midwestern train set. But the new Acela cars and engines are being built up there in I think by Alstrom in upper New York State, but they're not in service. They've got a couple of them ready. They had one train set out at Pueblo at the test center, Colorado, for about 5 months, and they're tweaking that one. But I don't think the new Acela service is going to start until at least the summer of 2022. But I could be wrong about that. But so don't be running to the East Coast too soon to ride the new Acela trains, because these old ones, like the ones we rode, they're getting wore out. And,
that's a lot of miles.
Yeah, so they've got some new, very sleek-looking cars, and I don't know if they're going to change the speed. But the main speed deal is above New Haven, going towards Rhode Island, and where I believe they get up to about 165 miles an hour.
That fast?
Yes, I believe so.
I thought it was like no more than 130 something. I know
Well, that's in the corridor between New York and Washington, but north of New Haven, Connecticut, they really roll.
Wow, I didn't know that. We have to go up there. I haven't ridden that one yet.
Well, we rode that part of it, but I can't remember the speed because again, when we rode that was at least 15 or so years ago.
Right. Okay.
All right. In the next topic, let's talk about private rail passenger cars and some of the great trips that Bill and I have had through our other group that we know about called the American Association of Private Car Owners, otherwise known as APRCO.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, let's wrap up this segment real quick, and then we'll go up there. But real quick on the Northeast Corridor, that is a profitable route for Amtrak. Is that correct?
I believe so, but Amtrak has some very strange accounting methods on how they bring in revenue and pay expenses. I think they got 2 or 3 sets of books, actually, but that's off the record.
Wow, that's interesting.
It
must be a government organization.
Well, we know Amtrak is a government organization, and our taxpayer dollars subsidize every long distance and regional train in America.
Right.
But that's a good topic for another.
I've printed up something on that. We will get to that sometime in the next couple of shows, talking about new rail plans across the country. Let's take a break real quick right now. You are sitting inside the train station, the new podcast about trains throughout the world and the U.S. Your host here, I'm Bill Waldrop. He is Jim Lueders. We'll be back in just a couple more minutes. Again, we'd like to hear from you. Please give us reach out to us. Let us know how you like the show, and if you've got some interesting topics, maybe even want to be a guest on the show. We can be reached by email at houstonrailfans@gmail.com. We'll be right back.
Don't miss Marcia Campbell, North America's trucking sweetheart, Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central on tncradio.live.
Being on the road can make you feel free, excited, and adventurous. It can also make you feel lonely and even depressed. So it's important for truckers, especially long-haul truck drivers, to bring items on the road to keep them entertained. Truckers have 10 hours off for a 24-hour day. Depending on how long the driver sleeps, there can be several hours where the trucker has nothing to do. We've broken down the list of essential items to keep in your truck in several different categories. The second category we talk about is entertainment. Laptop or tablet. Bring a laptop or tablet and stream your favorite movies or TV shows. If you don't have access to Wi-Fi or a personal hotspot, you can still bring your laptop, some DVDs, and watch a movie. Game console. Playing games is a great way to keep yourself entertained. You can also play with your friends. Bring your Xbox or PlayStation and set up your own gaming station in the cab of your truck. Puzzles, crosswords, or cards. If gaming or watching movies don't interest you, bring some puzzles or crosswords to solve. You can also get a deck of cards and play games like Solitaire, March Same Rank, Devil's Grip, Klondike. Books. Reading books is a great way to pass time and improve brain connectivity. Some popular trucker books include The Highway by C.J. Box, Blue Highways by William Least Heat Moon, Paradise Valley by C.J. Box, Rough Way to the Highway by Kelly Mac McCoy. Exercise equipment. Truck drivers' health suffers from the lack of exercise. Bringing exercise equipment on the road will keep you entertained and improve your overall well-being. There's several portable exercise equipment items you can store in the cab of your truck. They include dumbbells, resistance bands, kettlebells, and running shoes.
Thanks for joining us in the train station. I'm Bill Waldrop, along with my co-host Jim Lueders, talking about our love of trains across the U.S. and Canada, in fact, around the world. We have done some interesting travels. Jim, you wanted to talk about some organizations that promote train travel in the classic style. And you mentioned in the last segment, Aprico. Tell us a little more. You're a member of Aprico. I am currently not. Tell us about Aprico and what it's all about.
Well, Aprico is called the American Association of Private Car Owners, and it was founded about 30 years ago. That men that owned an actual passenger car, mainly everybody in those days bought a business car, like the car that the railroad officials, the president on down, would have at his disposal. Right. And those cars were quite easy to find back in the 1980s. Now they're much more expensive due to Amtrak restrictions. But Aprico has 3 classes of membership: the active member who owns a car, the membership of a car owner that's getting his car redone and modernized with the mechanical restrictions that will pass the Amtrak inspection, and then the associate member, like I am, which are just fans and people that care to join that have no ownership of a car. So the associate members amount to about 200 to 300, where the active members are less than about 80, I believe. It changes every year. Sure. But it's a great organization. Every year they get together and have a big convention and get all the private cars lined up and go to a destination city. And as an associate member, and if you're friends with these people, you can actually buy a ticket and ride with them throughout the trip. Sometimes these trips are anywhere from 8 to 15 days, depending on where we're going and what year it might be. But I know that I've been to many conventions over the years, but Bill joined us one year, and I think we went up to Nelson, British Columbia.
Right. That was quite it was the first time for me, and that was quite a trip. I flew into, I believe, Spokane, Washington, and rented a car and drove up to Nelson, British Columbia to get on the train. And then from there, we went to Banff. I think we had the convention at the Chateau Lake Louise.
We had the banquet the final night right there at the hotel. It was absolutely. The Canadian Pacific built that hotel, and a lot of other ones, along with the Canadian National. But we were actually on the Canadian Pacific Railroad, which has no passenger service because, as we know, via the Canadian Railroad is over on the Canadian National Railroad.
Oh, okay.
But we went through some fantastic scenery, and the mountains there make the Moffat Tunnel look like a little model train layout.
Yeah, it was just magnificent. After that I said, I'd love to live in that area of British Columbia because it just looked like a postcard everywhere. It's just amazing. And we rode the train to Vancouver. I think we stayed overnight in Vancouver, and then we went south into the States and
back to Seattle.
And I remember when I flew into Spokane, everybody said, okay, no, we're crossing the Canadian border. So don't be surprised, they have dogs and, they're checking for drugs. They may check your passports. And, it kind of made me nervous because I had never done international travel before at that point. Since then, I've been, with you around the world, but it was my first time to cross the border. And I was quite anxious and quite nervous and said, 5 miles to the border, 1 mile to the border. And I pulled up at this border stop, and it's like a little wooden shack out on a 2-lane highway in the woods. And I'm like, this is it? And some little old man comes walking out there. I pulled up there at the stop sign. He sat on a stool and said, well, hello there. How are you? And I said, well, I'm good. And he asked me where I was from and what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm driving up to Nelson, British Columbia to catch a passenger train. He says, well, there's no passenger trains in Nelson. I said, there is now. And that's when I told him about Aprico and what I knew about it at the time, this whole string of cars. And so he started launching into his history as a young man like you, traveling across the U.S. and Canada by train. And and there was nobody else there. It was just me and my car solo and this guy out in the middle of nowhere. And that was the border crossing into Canada. He never even checked my passport.
Your automobile.
I rented a car in Spokane.
Yeah.
Remember, I took it to Nelson, and then Mike Harris and Donna took the car and drove back to Spokane and then flew back to Houston. So that was my first. And so we sat there 15, 20 minutes talking about trains. And finally, another car pulled up behind us. He goes, well, I guess I'll let you go. Well, have a safe trip and enjoy your stay in Canada. And I was like, thanks. So I thought, well, that was easy. That, is that it? So that wasn't scary at all. A little different. Once we got to Vancouver and then back south, crossing it back towards Seattle, that was a different story. They pulled the train to the side and they walked through with dogs, and they were serious. And everything was fine, of course. But that was my first Aprico trip and first time to ever cross an international border. So that was ingrained in my memory very strongly there. But yeah, Aprico, great organization, beautiful cars, nice people, and certainly a great way to travel like they used to many, many years ago.
Oh, yeah. And they still do it. Amtrak's put a lot of restrictions on in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And the fare is very expensive. It's about $3.50 a mile to move your private car. So if you're going on a long trip like Chicago to California and back, it's quite expensive, but it is definitely worth the experience. So you might want to look at the Aprico website sometime, and that would be AARP.
AAPRCO in Aprico.
Yeah.
AAPRCO.com or .org.
Let's say it again.
Go ahead.
AARP.
Okay.
And you can navigate the site and see a lot of great pictures, and you can join right online.
Okay. Yeah, that's again a great organization. But to our listeners, again, if you've traveled by Amtrak or just chased trains and photographed them, something like that, let us know. We'd like to hear your story about your travels. Now, we've only got about 4 minutes left here in this segment, Jim. We also did some other travels. Let's see, we did Northeast Corridor, we did Apricot trips. We also, of course, chased the Steam Crew. Another one we did, we flew to Los Angeles. And we rode some of the local commuter trains out there.
Metro Rail.
Yeah.
All over Los Angeles. And I think we rode down to San Diego one day too.
I know we went up the coast. I want to say, was it Santa Barbara?
Probably.
And where the pier is, they had like a pier out there.
Right.
And we went up there and we had lunch at the Santa Barbara Pier, and did a little shopping and looking around. That was really nice, and brought the train back. So, yeah, the good old days of cool fares allow us to do things like that. So,
yeah,
now we do.
United doesn't have those because Continental merged with United, and they gave up on the cheap airline fares for the weekend, but they were quite popular.
Oh, and,
and we sure got to do a lot of traveling. I think we went to Chicago once too.
Probably so. Right. I know we did a bunch of
them. And to Denver. I think we went to Denver to go to the Railroad Museum in Golden and just rail fan around in the mountains there.
Now, we do have tentative plans when they do release the new Acela train sets on the Northeast Corridor. We definitely want to go up and ride those.
Oh, yeah.
Up and down and see how they compare to the old ones. So that'd be a great trip, and going that fast. You said they do 160. I didn't know that. I thought they did like 135.
No, up in Rhode Island, they kick it up a notch.
They'll start moving.
Yeah, not very far. I don't know the exact mileage, but I'd say for about 40 miles, maybe as many as 55 miles in Rhode Island. If Rhode Island's really that big, they really get moving.
That's good. Yeah. Now, a little more information about Apricot. It's a string of all private passenger cars. But it is considered an Amtrak move, right? They use Amtrak engines on there. Is that correct?
Yeah, on a special train they would, but on a normal train, if you just wanted to go, to California or to
just click on the back of a current Amtrak train.
Current Amtrak train, you send in your move request, and then they approve it and send you the bill, and you're off.
But the the Apricot trip, is where all the cars are together, pulled by a couple of Amtrak.
Yeah,
engines.
that's the special train for the convention that only happens once a year. Just a few months ago, they ran that trip. They had 13 cars, and they went up to Burlington, Vermont.
Nice.
So Amtrak took them from Chicago to Albany, Resner, New York, where they got on the Short Line Vermont Railroad and rode into the North Woods, as they say, of New Hampshire and Vermont.
Beautiful.
Spent a few days up there and then came back. Right. So Amtrak is still they enjoy private car business, but they put so many restrictions on different areas where you can't get on and off of your train. Now, of course, we can still do that here in Houston, but there's many cities. Like the most popular one was Whitefish, Montana, because everybody wanted to go to Glacier National Park, but they cut that out because of dwell times and delay of train.
Right. I've never been there. I'd like to go there someday. Oh,
it's one of the best national parks outside of the Grand Canyon.
That sounds like another good trip for us.
Another idea of a show would be to talk about the Grand Canyon and the Grand Canyon Tourist Railroad. Okay. I hope some of our listeners have been on that, because that's quite popular in the summertime.
Yeah, and I have not seen that, and I would like to very, very much. Okay, let's wrap up this segment real quick. You are in the train station with Jim Lueders and Bill Waldrop. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back for the next segment.
Hey, rideshare drivers and gig economy workers. The host of TNCRadio.live, the Rideshare Rodeo Podcast, and the Gig Economy Podcast come together for news, talk, music, stories, laughs, and more. We're live Fridays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on TNCRadio.live.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 simple ways to improve your physical health as a truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career. However, it's not very rewarding for your physical health. A truck driver's lifestyle makes it difficult for them to be healthy. Because of their lifestyle, truckers are more likely to develop serious health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. Although a truck driver's lifestyle doesn't promote healthy living, it doesn't mean that a truck driver cannot be healthy while on the road. There's several ways you can improve your health on the road. Here are 4 things you can start doing today to improve your physical health on the road as a truck driver. Avoid harmful foods. Avoiding unhealthy foods is way harder than it sounds. As a truck driver, your healthy food choices are extremely limited. While it may seem impossible to completely cut out unhealthy foods from your diet, it might be a good idea to cut back. You can start cutting back on unhealthy foods by packing meals in your truck. That way, the next time you get hungry on the road, you can eat a much healthier meal instead of eating greasy, high-calorie fast food. Another way you can start cutting back on unhealthy foods is to make a list of unhealthy items you eat every day and start slowly replacing them with a healthier option. For example, if you drink soda 3 times a day, cut back to 2, then to 1, and then none. Stock up on healthy foods. To live a healthier lifestyle, you have to cut back on heavily processed foods. Unfortunately, a truck driver's diet heavily consists of processed foods. Stocking up on healthy groceries is one of the best ways you can improve your physical health. When grocery shopping before your trip, avoid frozen pre-made meals, sodas, fried foods, chips. Instead, look for whole grain, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats. Start exercising. Exercise is essential to a driver's overall physical and mental health. Truck drivers have to get creative to stay fit while on the road. Finding the time to exercise can be a challenge for truck drivers. Drivers spend up to 11 hours a day on the road. After working all day, exercising may seem like the last thing you want to do, but you'll thank yourself later. Exercising a few times a week will not only improve your physical health, but also mental health. Get a good night's rest. The right amount of sleep is crucial for a truck driver. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount of alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready to take on the day. Not only is sleep an important factor for job performance, but it's also important for lowering stress levels and improving your immune system. Now here are some ways to promote better sleep. Turn off electronics an hour before bed. Invest in a good mattress and pillow. Put up curtains in your truck cab. Avoid caffeine before bed. And exercise. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Thanks for joining us in the train station. I'm Bill Waldrop along with my co-host Jim Lueders, and we're talking about what we love to do, and that's be involved and travel with and photograph trains and still work for them in some kind of way here across the U.S. and Canada. Okay, on our final segment this hour, let's talk a little more about some of the personal trips we've taken either together or separately. You recently presented a program at a local meeting of our historical society here about your travels in Mexico that went on quite a bit and covered a lot of territory. Tell us a little bit about that, about those excursions and what you experienced down there and when it was.
Okay, Bill. This was a long time ago, August of 1964. I found through the Trains magazine want ads about this trip to Mexico in August of 1964 and wrote to the tour operator and was able to secure a ticket. It was going to be a private Pullman on regularly scheduled Mexican National Railway of Mexico passenger trains. And I flew down to El Paso and met the group. We departed Juarez, went south through Chihuahua and down through to Mexico City. And this is in the days of Mexico and the National Railways of Mexico, the NDM, which was still using a lot of steam engines. And of course, that's why we went down there to photograph the steam engines. Yeah. And we get to Mexico City and get a great tour of the Valley Mexico yards, the hump yard and the roundhouse. And they brought a few engines out, ran it around the turntable, and we saw a lot of great action right there in Mexico City. But then we continued on a day or so later and went all the way up to Veracruz and on to Merida, Yucatan, where the United Railways of the Yucatan used narrow gauge engines and steam and diesel, freight and passenger cars, and had a little trip around that area, came back down towards Mexico City, and then our Pullman was switched on to a what they call the Guadalajara special businessman's train. It's an evening train with all first class Pullmans. And of course, all these Pullmans came from the U.S. railroads that they sold them back in the 1960s. So everything worked, the air conditioning and the lights and everything. But this train from Mexico City to Guadalajara had 2 diners and very, very prominent businessmen and wives and what have you on the train. The food was excellent. Then we get to Guadalajara and we get our car. This is towards the latter part of the trip.
Yeah.
We get our car switched on to the Chihuahua and Pacific and go up the coastline, which was just really something because they had just built that part of the railroad in the early 60s. Yeah. Tunnels, bridges, electric engine was a helper unit that they put on in one town. I don't remember the name of that town, but we had diesels up front and because it was electric line and had an electric helper engine. It looks like it came from the New Haven. I don't know the diesel designation of that engine, but it was quite unique, and ended up back in Chihuahua and then got our northbound train. And 2 weeks later, we were back in Juarez, crossed the border with no problems. And I did not get sick, but the passenger service in Mexico in the early 60s was really phenomenal. And I think that lasted until about 1968.
Yeah.
And then they went out of the passenger business. But luckily enough, I was able to ride this fantastic trip. And I had an upper berth. The car was sections and drawing rooms.
Right.
And there were about 16, 20 of us. I can't remember the exact number of people, but it was sold out. It was a great trip.
Yeah.
And I paid $250 round trip.
For the whole thing?
For the whole trip, including some meals and some hotels.
Wow. Can't do that today.
No, I can't do that today.
It costs you more than that just to fly there to meet the train.
Right. But now there is no train in Mexico. They're totally out of the passenger business.
Are they? Yeah, I was going to ask you that. None at all?
No, none at all.
You'd think as big of a country that is, as many people as they have.
Right. But they used to have a tourist train down there in the Copper Canyon, but I don't know what happened to that. We'd have to look that up on the web because they did have a tourist train that ran in the Copper Canyon.
Now they do still have active freight trains, but no, they're not running any passenger trains.
Very busy on the freight service because we ship a lot of things from Mexico, like automobiles. Right. Ford, GM have big factories down there, and you see these automobile rail cars on BNSF and UP every day.
Yeah.
They come through Eagle Pass, Texas, and Laredo is the main gateway. Right. And the Kansas City Southern of Mexico is a very prominent railroad down there now.
Right.
So that's Mexico. What were we going to talk about? We had another trip.
Well, most recently, and what was it, 4 years ago?
It was 2 years ago. It was just 2 years ago. We went to Switzerland. And we met up with a group called Chris at trains.com. I believe he has a newsletter, and he runs a lot of trips around the country with private cars and Europe. So we picked out this Switzerland trip, and I think we were gone another 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, it was 2 weeks there, and then we'll talk about it in more detail. But we eventually ended up down in
Milan, Italy.
Which was interesting. Yeah. But yeah, it was a great trip. So we flew separate airlines, and I flew KLM. I think you were United, and we met in Zurich, Switzerland.
Good. That's where the trip started.
Right. Yeah, and I don't have the itinerary in front of me, but basically for 2 weeks we traveled. Gosh, I guess almost the entire Swiss rail network.
Yeah, we had a Swiss first class rail pass, which was included in our ticket.
Right.
And we used that. And we also got to ride on the lakes on steamboats that were quite unique. Right. But some days we took as many as 3 trains. I mean, they wore us out. They really did. We did a
Glacier Express. That was beautiful. And we went up the side of mountains up on the cog railways.
Yeah. We made
you remember going up that one on the cog with a steam engine pushing us up?
Oh, yeah.
That scared the heck out of me.
Made it to San Moritz and the Matterhorn.
Yeah.
And boy, it was a great trip. So if you really want to ride some real trains out there, go to Switzerland.
And you can set your clock and you can set your watch by them. When they say they're leaving at 9:07 a.m., they're leaving at 9:07 and they're not waiting on you.
Yeah.
So amazing train system.
No lingering on the platform for photographs.
No, you do not. You don't have time for it.
Yeah.
And the trains are clean. They're fast, very efficient. And just absolutely beautiful countryside. And if you don't know much about Switzerland, it's interesting. Although we never really left the border of Switzerland because it bumps up against Germany. When you go to that area of Switzerland, it's all basically German. The German clothing and restaurants and shops and things like that.
That was it. That was in the northern part by Zurich. But when we got down there by the Italian side, they were all Italians.
Yeah, it was all Italian, like you're in Italy. Although you're still in Switzerland, it was like you might as well have just been in Italy. And then over towards France, and boy, do we have a story about that. Everything was in French, including the waiters at the hotel restaurant.
Right. But
we'll all about that.
Switzerland is the rail capital. Now Germany we're going to go back there sometime. Hopefully we get back there next summer.
So yeah.
But Switzerland was quite unique. But we learned our most important thing: do not go in June, July, or August.
Oh, it's so hot. Oh my God. We're so, here, especially in the Houston area where we're based, everything is air conditioned. Of course, most of the country is, but and it was an unusually warm summer for them as well. But even, all the hotels we were in were these fancy little boutique hotels. And they're like, if you have any air at all, they're blowing basically air over chilled water pipes and not removing the humidity. And I mean, it's like you just have to sleep on top of the bed. You'd stick into everything. It was beautiful, but it was just like very uncomfortable. Yeah, we'll go in the fall or spring because it was just we were pretty miserable without.
Yeah, do not go with plus all the other tourists. But the trains were crowded, but they were clean, and they had, of course, service on board, food service and beverages, and But we did stay in some very nice hotels, and
we did. And we had to do a laundry at the laundromat at the hostel.
Yeah.
Had to walk it a few blocks, but it's just one of those. What's neat about traveling in any form is that you can plan the trips. Okay, we're going to go to Zurich, and we're going to go, to this and this and this and this. It's the little things within the trip that you almost remember more of the little, like the snotty French waiter and going to the laundromat and things like that. Well, when we finished there, we went to, we took another train, broke off from the group, and went down to Milan, Italy, which was very nice. Saw La Scala, saw the big shopping mall, the fashions. It's a great place. But, as I've told people, it was a beautiful city, but the food was awful. You have to go to southern Italy to get any good food. Next time I would go to Rome and south, because the food in Milan was just not very good. It kept us alive. That's about it.
But it's expensive. Switzerland, they don't mess around. I mean, it's very expensive.
It is. Take your gold bricks. A bottle of water is $8.
Yeah. Oh, I don't remember that.
Oh, I do. Because that's all I drank.
Yeah.
$8 a pop.
Yeah.
Hey, we got to wrap it up, Jim. Okay. We're about done for this hour. Thanks so much. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. And this is The Train Station with your host, Jim Lueders and Bill Waldrop. We're based out of Houston, Texas. We'd like to hear from you. Please drop us a line. We'd like to know how you like the show and if you got any topics and any questions, anything for us. That is HoustonRailFans@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning into The Train Station. We'll see you on the next program.